Today is a very important birthday. Well, to me at least. Today marks the 15th anniversary of Saint Anger by Metallica. This certainly isn't a very important birthday to a lot of Metallica fans, but I personally really enjoyed this album. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this particular Metallica album, this is easily the black sheep of Metallica's entire discography. Now, of course, Metallica has been involved with way worse. Lulu immediately comes to mind, but that was a collaboration album, so I don't really count that. So, out of Metallica's actual discography, the Saint Anger is easily the most hated out of all their albums. And, well, I remember first hearing about this album in 2014 when I was getting into Metallica and listening to their more classic albums like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. And I remember hearing about this album and how supposedly it was so god awful. How this album was just complete garbage. So I decided to give this album a listen because I was morbidly curious and I was like, is this album really as terrible as a lot of people say it is? And I listened to this album back in 2014 and was like, really? That was the album that a lot of people fucking hated? Okay, it wasn't great. I thought it was just decent at best, but, I thought there were a few shit songs here and there, but I was like, is this really that bad? And then and then I didn't listen to it for another 2 years, and then around in 2016, I listened to this album again, and I liked it a little bit more. I was still like, really, this is the Metallica album everyone hates. This is really their worst. And I still thought it was decent at best. I didn't think it was this great album or anything. And then just recently, back in April, I was listening to Metallica's entire discography, and then I made it up to Saint Anger. And I don't know, something just clicked inside of me because I listened to this album and I thought it was fucking great. I was rocking out to this album. I loved this album's raw, dirty sound. I loved the energy. I loved how a lot of these songs are fast paced. I loved the rawness of this album. I really enjoyed it. Aside from two songs, My World and Shoot Me Again. Shoot Me Again is easily Metallica's worst fucking song. But that aside, I really, really like this album. Fast-paced songs such as Frantic and Dirty Window that have this really fast-paced, angry, raw sound. This fuck the world, fuck everyone around me, I hate everything, and I just want to break shit. The songs like those have that kind of attitude to them, and I really like it. It really works for me when I'm in a pissed off mood. This album is especially good. It's especially good because I could just crank up songs like that, crank up songs like Frantic, and the fast paced, really really angry songs like that, and it gets some anger out of me, and it's kind of a cathartic listen. And I've seen some people mention this in YouTube comments and say, you have to be in a certain mood to like this album. For a lot of you, if you're in a really pissed off mood, turn on this album, then it might be better. And then some people come back at them and say, if you have to be in a certain mood to like this album, then that shows how much of a fail this album is. Okay, maybe you don't like it when you're just in a calm state, but still, if it helps you, if this album helps you when you're in a pissed off mood and you enjoy it, does that really make the album a complete failure? Really? Because to me, that's a success in a way. Making you feel, it makes you feel less angry after listening to it, and that's kind of what it does. I mean, I don't just listen to this album when I'm in a pissed off mood. Around the time when I first rediscovered this album a few months ago, I was kind of obsessed with this album. I listened to this album a lot for 2 weeks straight. Not just because I really enjoyed it, which I do. It was also because I just wanted to really find what people hate so fucking much about this album, and why people consider it Metallica's absolute worst. And of course, there are some very glaring flaws with this album. Lars Ulrich's snare drum, yeah. But still, the Lars is playing in this album is still heavily joked about today. But when I listen to this album, I feel like the snare actually adds to it. Now I can perfectly understand why people don't like the snare in this album. Okay, I'm not going to call you an idiot for not liking the snare. I can perfectly understand why you don't. I understand it could probably get annoying for some of you, but for me personally, I really like the snare in this album. It adds to the anger that's contained in this album. It adds to that raw, dirty sound to the album. I like this unpolished, very raw, naked sound of Metallica. It's something I really do like. And I don't know. When I was listening to this album, I thought I was when I was listening to this album obsessively for like 2 weeks. I was thinking, am I fucking crazy for liking this album so much? I mean, it's certainly not their best. Doesn't come anywhere close to albums like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. It doesn't even fucking compare. But still, I do think this is a solid effort by Metallica. I think this is a very good album, very solid album. And it's definitely worth a listen if you're really curious to hear this album. Okay, maybe you might hate it and be part of the whole mob that says, oh, this album is so terrible, but at least you gave it a shot. And also, at least Metallica actually took a risk with this album. All right, Metallica, when they came out with this album, just came out of easily probably their worst era, where they're making very commercial-friendly songs. They weren't exactly a metal band anymore. They weren't that heavy. They were probably doing like hard rock and shit. The Load and Reload albums and shit like that. People were really pissed off at Metallica because they weren't really metal anymore. They weren't heavy like they used to be, and they're making very commercial friendly songs like that. And then they come out with this raw, dirty, heavy as fuck album, and people hate it. They hated it so much. I was 2 when this album came out back in 2003, so I didn't witness any of the severe backlash this album got. But oh my god, this album was panned by fans and critics alike, and this album was very, very, very hated. It's probably not as hated as it was back then, but still, this album, I still see people joke about this album, say this is easily Metallica's worst album, and shit like that, and honestly, it doesn't piss me off, but it kind of saddens me, because I think there's a lot of very, underrated gems in this album. And also another criticism I see of this album is that the songs drag on for too long. And honestly, I don't really have an issue with with any of the songs' lengths. People, there are, I will admit there are some songs that do kind of sort of drag on, okay? So, let's take Invisible Kid, for example. My favorite song on the album, go figure. Okay, maybe that song could have been condensed down from 8 minutes to about, 4 minutes, because that was a pretty repetitive song that didn't really vary it up all that much, and really wasn't worthy of being 8 minutes long, but still, I really enjoyed that song. I thought it was catchy and all that, and there are other songs that do probably drag on for a bit too long, probably longer than they should be, but honestly, again, like I said, that isn't really an issue for me. I mean, actually, after listening to this album and doing other things while I was listening to this album, I was like, and looking back at at a lot of these songs' lengths, and I was like, this song is fucking 7 minutes, or this song is fucking 8 minutes long. I didn't know that it went by much faster than the song really is, because I had a lot of fun listening to this album. It's a very energetic album, and I love the energy. I love the anger of this album. It doesn't bore me. I wasn't not at any point while listening to the album I was like, oh my fucking god, can this song just fucking end already? I wasn't like that. Now, I'm not completely sticking up for the album, okay? I know the album isn't completely devoid of flaws. In fact, it does have some pretty glaring flaws, like I mentioned earlier, Lars Ulrich's drumming, the songs probably going on for a bit too long, longer than they really should have. And, there was also James Hetfield's voice. It wasn't exactly up to par. It wasn't exactly up to par in this album. I mean, he did try. There were some instances flaws in some songs where he tried to, hit some notes that were kind of, out of his reach, like, in Unnamed Feeling, he tried that, and in Frantic, he also tried that, and also the lyrics were kind of dumb at some points in the album, but, all that aside, I still really enjoyed the album, all that, the album's flaws weren't bad enough to deter me away from this album, to make me think, oh, this is a terrible album. This is easily Metallica's worst album out of their entire discography. Now, of course, it's not a perfect album, like I just said, I just addressed the album's flaws, but still pretty good in my opinion. It's also not even Metallica's worst, in my opinion. Of course, they made Lulu, but that's not really in Metallica's main album lineup. I would say Metallica's worst actual album. Very unpopular opinion, I know. Black Album. I did not like Black Album, aside from 4 songs. Enter Sandman, of course. Sad But True, The Unforgiven, of course, and The God That Failed You. A lot of the songs on that album I did not enjoy at all. And I think the song Nothing Else Matters isn't even a good song, and I think it's overrated as fuck. Ugh. But anyways, I'm not talking about the Black Album here. I'm talking about Saint Anger. I do really appreciate, though, that Metallica did take a big risk with this album. Like I mentioned earlier, they just came out of the 90s when they were making some of their most commercial-friendly songs in their entire discography. The Black Album was filled with them, Load and Reload were filled with them. And then they make this album that's just raw and dirty and, it was in your face and gave no fucks and was heavy as fuck. And of course people hated it, but still, I do like that they did kind of take a different kind of direction in this album, because no other Metallica album sounds like this album. Now, some people may think that's a very good thing, but I do appreciate that they did take a risk in general, because, they could have easily continued making those very commercial-friendly songs that they were making in the 90s, and just continue that in this album, but no, they didn't. They decided to take a completely different direction with this album, and I do, no matter how bad the risk may be, I still do really, really pay a lot of respect to bands that do take very big risks with their albums and songs, because a lot of bands like to play it safe. They see what's popular, they see what people like from them, and they continue trying to emulate those things that those people really like. But Metallica, they gave no fucks. They made an album that they probably did think that a lot of people were not going to like, but they went ahead and made it anyway because they wanted to make it, and I do really commend Metallica for that, honestly. So there you have it. This is why I really, really enjoy Saint Anger by Metallica. Now, don't take this video the wrong way. The intent of this video is not to sway you or call you an idiot for not liking this album, because I can perfectly understand why you don't like this album. Like I acknowledged several times in this video, this album does have some pretty glaring flaws, and that's probably putting it lightly, but, regardless, I still enjoy this album, and it's completely fine that you don't enjoy this album. I just really, really enjoy it, and, don't agree with the popular opinion that, this album sucks or anything like that. And, I don't even expect this video to sway anyone who really hates this album prior to watching this video, because this is one of those albums where if you hate it, you more than likely just hate it for life, and nothing will ever sway you and convince you as to why this is a good album. But, that's fine. That's completely fine. Different strokes for different folks, I guess. Now, of course, like I also acknowledged many times in this video, this album does not come close to their first 4 albums, and it's not even the best post and Justice for All album. I think that goes to Death Magnetic, and hell, even Hardwired was better than this album, and even the Load and Reload albums were better than Saint Anger, and I also liked the Load and Reload albums. I'm a very, very weird Metallica fan, I know, and of course this doesn't come close to Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets. And let me just throw out another unpopular opinion out there. I also think Injustice for All was kind of a decline from their previous 3 albums before Injustice, especially Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning. I don't know. Maybe there'll be this one weird Metallica fan that'll be like that'll come across this video and be like, "Saint Anger is so much better than their first four albums. It blows albums like Ride the Lightning and Master Puppets out of the water. It is truly their magnum opus." And if you truly do believe that, then yeah, I really don't know what the fuck to say to you. Anyways, there are also quite a few albums and songs that I do enjoy that a lot of people hate. So I might make this into a little series where I discuss albums and songs that I really like that a lot of people really fucking hate. So be on the lookout for that. No promises though, and I don't know when the fuck I'll get around to making that, but it's definitely something I'm very interested in making. Anyways, with that all out of the way, that's all I have to say. Bye bye.